This happened about a decade ago and was one of the most terrifying things that had and has ever happened to me in all of my years alive. I came out of it mostly unscathed, but mentally, I was distressed for a long time after this happened. It was a chilly Halloween night, the kind that bites at the nape of your neck and drags you down, making you tired within the first hour or two. My husband, Mike, had taken our little girl Sophie out for her very first trick-or-treating experience, and I got to stay home and hand out candy. I wasn't upset about that. I wanted her to have a good time, but I also knew that they were going to have a lot of trick-or-treaters coming through, as we have every year we've lived there. I wanted to be there to see how she managed, but Sophie has always been a daddy's girl, so she wanted him to go with her. It's alright, I get it. I was the same way. I set up a cozy little area by the window, complete with my blanket, hot chocolate, and my old Kindle, just waiting for the doorbell to go off. I would read a few pages and have to set it down to give out the candy to the kids that came by. I was actually enjoying it, having some alone time, but getting to talk to some kids about their costumes. There were some pretty fun ones. There was one girl that was a zombie hot dog. That was amazing. And I remember how happy that little boy was when I told him how much I adored his costume. As the night went on, the rush obviously started to dwindle, and I was getting more and more of my book read between doorbell rings. It was around 8:45-ish when the doorbell rang again, the first time in a while. I opened the door expecting to see a group of kids smiling at me, but instead was met with a lone, tall figure. He wore a grimy, tattered suit and a grotesque mask that seemed strangely out of place. It was simple, mostly just plain and white, but spattered with red to look bloody. Bit old for trick-or-treating, aren't ya? I tried to joke, but I could hear my voice wavering slightly. The man didn't reply to me at all. He just lifted his hand as if he was expecting candy. I was all for ending this interaction, so I dropped a few pieces of candy into his hand. After a few moments of us standing there silently, I kind of smiled and said something like, well, Happy Halloween. He sort of tilted his head at me and didn't move, so I went ahead and shut the door and locked it. I tried to shake off the odd feeling, telling myself that he was just really in character and it was Halloween, so the creepiness should have been expected. But my comfort was short-lived. A few minutes later, I heard what sounded like a tapping coming from the back of the house. I initially thought it was just a branch tapping on the window or something like that. I walked back into the kitchen and glanced out into the backyard, and what I saw caused my heart to skip a beat. There, standing on my back porch, seemingly just standing there and studying the back door, was the man in the suit with the bloody mask. I could see what looked like a pry bar in his hand, and he was holding it like he was about to use it to pry the door open. I stood there for a few moments, shocked and scared, but after a few seconds, he glanced over and we made eye contact. When we did, he lifted his free hand and waved, which freaked me right the hell out. As soon as I pulled back, I heard him starting to kick the door, trying to bash it open with his foot. I'm going to be honest, I didn't really know what to do. This man was trying to kick the back door open, and I didn't know if I should hide or run or where I would run to. I decided that running was my best bet, and within seconds, I was making a dash to the front door, unlocking it, and running out onto the front sidewalk. I figured if nothing else, this would put some distance between myself and him, and if he was trying to get to me, he would have to run around the house and jump the fence, which gave me time to get to the neighbor's house or something, which is actually what I did. As soon as I got out onto the front sidewalk, I ran to the left toward the closest house with the light on and started banging on the door. An older gentleman answered the door holding a candy bowl and holding a bit of an annoyed look on his face. His stare changed to confusion when he saw me, and I started telling him that someone was trying to break into my house and that I needed him to call the cops. Thankfully, we did kind of know each other in passing. We weren't close, but he knew who I was, and I knew who he was, so he motioned for me to come inside and asked me what all had happened. I told him about the creepy guy that came to the door, and then told him that before I ran out of the house, that same man was trying to kick in the back door. He nodded, grabbed his phone, and dialed 911. After about 7 minutes, the police pulled up in front of his house with their lights flashing, and I went out to meet them. They asked me to tell them again what had happened, and I explained the whole situation to them. When they checked the house, the man wasn't even there, thankfully, but every room between the back door and the living room looked like it had been ransacked. He'd thrown the dining room furniture all around the room, and he had pretty much destroyed the living room, but nothing was missing, and he had already left. I described him to the cops, and they said that they would be on the lookout, but without knowing what he actually looked like, there was very little chance of them finding him. Mike and Sophie got back home while all this was unfolding, and I had to tell Mike about the man and explain the whole thing. He was obviously not happy that this happened. There was never any indication that they caught the guy, and with the exception of the door being messed up, a couple busted dining room chairs, and my Kindle being completely destroyed, nothing else had been damaged. We turned the light off after that in an attempt to dissuade any late trick-or-treaters from stopping by after that. That Halloween actually did scar me mentally. Every time the doorbell rang, I would tense up and jump slightly, even though I knew that it wouldn't be him. After that, the spookiness of Halloween kind of lost its appeal for me, and when that night rolled around the next year, we both went with Sophie to do her trick-or-treating. There was no way in hell I was going to stay home alone again after this all played out. I was a pretty dumb teenager or preteen growing up. I always tried to push the boundaries of what I was allowed to do or what I could get away with. I had a couple younger siblings too, and one older than me, so I guess you could call it the middle child syndrome. I wanted the freedom my older brother had, as he had his own car and was able to go wherever he wanted with little question from my parents. I also ended up watching my little sister and brother at times when I wanted to hang out with my friends. So when my parents told me that I was too old to trick or treat, but said I could stay home and hand out candy, I became a little upset. I was okay with not going with them to trick or treat, but I certainly didn't want to stay cooped up at home during the holiday, so I voiced my concerns. Thankfully, they finally saw my side of things and agreed to let me stay with a friend for the night. I quickly packed a small bag of things, called my friend to have their parents pick me up, and I was free for the night. The thing is, we had made plans, so I was hopeful my parents would agree to let me go. My friend Charlie, his brother Mikey, who was 2 years older than us, and I were going to meet up with a few other friends at an old cemetery. We were just going to walk around, tell stories, and maybe try our hand at ghost hunting. All in all, it was the three of us, plus Mikey's friend, they called Trout, plus our other 3 friends, Becca, Lance, and Myra. We lived in a pretty small town with very little crime, and everyone kept to themselves. But not only was crime uncommon, but anything really worth talking about, which meant there was little life going on after dark. This was how we got away with going to the cemetery. It was a pretty old one, and I couldn't recall ever seeing a service being held there while I was young, so I think it was just kept as it was, and that was that. It was also within walking distance, so we all met there. There weren't any trespassing signs when we got there, but just a small gate to keep cars from going in it. We could practically just step over it. The girls became nervous right from the start, but we did our best to keep them calm so we didn't have to leave before we even did anything. So we got in and started walking around, looking at the different headstones and trying to find the oldest one. After looking at them all, and some of the harmless but eerie sayings on them, we made our way over behind the small building that was there. There was a small clearing behind it with a couple of milk crates, a bucket with water and cigarette butts in it, and other random stuff. Then the back of the cemetery was lined with trees. We stopped there for a bit and just talked, teasing each other. Mikey and Trout told us some creepy story about a kid who unalived himself in the gym locker rooms at the old high school several years ago and was now haunting it, claiming that's why they built the new school. The old school is now for the board or something, so it's not really used a lot. The girls were definitely freaked out. Charlie kept affirming everything he was saying, but I think the rest of us were a little skeptical. They mentioned they wanted to try and break in there to see, but argued with Charlie and I about going, saying if he got caught, he didn't want us in trouble too. After some time, we got more on the topic of ghosts, and again, Mikey and Trout tried to spook us, saying there was definitely paranormal stuff going on here. While we joked around, the girls were getting more scared and started saying that we should leave. The rest of us weren't really ready to go though, so they said they would just walk back alone. Becca lived the closest as she was pretty much down the street from the cemetery, and Myra was staying the night with her too. While it was a mood kill, I'd like to think I was still some kind of gentleman, so I agreed to walk them out to make sure they got out okay, and that way I could see them most of the way down the sidewalk. Lance said he would go with us too, so the other 3 stayed where they were until we got back. The cemetery went pretty far back, and the entrance was to the side a bit more, so we would lose sight of the others from the front for sure. Not to mention the fact that there were no lights in there. The only light we had was from the flashlights we brought and those that had cell phones. I was not one of those people, but the girls shared a flashlight and I had my own as well. We didn't talk much on our way to the front, but then Becca turned around and asked me what I had said. When I said we didn't say anything, she looked confused or suspicious, but continued on. That's when I presume I heard what she did. It sounded like someone whispering something very quickly, so I couldn't make out what was being said. I brought it up, and they all agreed they heard it too. We tried to ignore it, but the girls only seemed to be more worried. That's when, from the corner of my eye, to the right, opposite of the building, I saw a dark figure run across the grounds. I assume Becca saw it too because she screamed. Lance and I tried to calm them and tell them just to hurry up, so they started running. The next thing I know was we started picking up the pace to keep up with them when I felt someone push me from behind. I fell to the ground and everything immediately went pitch black. it made no sense to not be able to see anything. I could at least make out dark shapes of the plots, my friends, or hell, wherever my flashlight landed, but there was nothing. Then the gurgling sound started. It was like someone was right by my ear, choking on water or something. And lastly was the pressure. I couldn't breathe. It felt as if someone was covering my face. I remember swinging my arms in front of me, trying to grab or push whatever was off of me, but nothing was working. Then, out of nowhere, I could hear Lance yelling my name, and I was being pulled to a streetlight. I looked around confused, not understanding what just happened, but ironically, the three of them were all pale as a ghost. I asked them what happened when they explained that they just heard the thump of me falling to the ground. Lance ran over to me and watched horrified as my eyes were wide open, seemingly trying to look around while my arms flailed in front of me like I was fighting something. He said nothing was there though. He finally found an opening to grab my arm and pretty much dragged me out of there until I finally stood on my own 2 feet. I sat on the curb while he called Charlie, telling him we needed to leave. They finally walked back to the front, all looking a bit concerned. Lance explained what he saw, and I explained my side of it. Mikey didn't seem to take it seriously at first, saying we were just messing with him, but Charlie seemed convinced of what happened. I certainly wasn't ready to go back in there after whatever the hell that was, so we finally convinced Mikey and Trout to go. We walked the girls back to Becca's place, and I did my best to act like I was fine as to not worry them, but honestly, that scared the hell out of me. I don't want to say I thought I was going to die, but the fact that I seemed to go completely blind and couldn't breathe was pretty damn terrifying. The rest of us walked to a nearby gas station to be in the light, and we talked about what happened a bit more. Charlie, Mike, and Trout claimed they were behind the building the whole time, and even thought we were trying to pull some kind of prank because they could hear the whispering and gurgling too. I don't think they were trying to mess with us either, since Lance ran for me and clearly didn't see anyone around. We ended up going back to Charlie's house for a while to chill before Trout and Lance went home too. I didn't really sleep that night. I was still pretty shaken up and wondering what that could have been or meant. I'm past it now that I'm an adult, but I still tell people about it because it was one of the most terrifying things to happen to me. If anyone out there knows what that could have been or what it meant, I'm all for hearing your thoughts. Oh, and no, I did not and will not be going back to that cemetery again. Back in high school, I was invited to a friend's Halloween party. It was actually being hosted by this girl, Iris, who I had practically grown up with, so we had always been really close. She had also recently broken up with her boyfriend, Blaine, so I was hoping to be there for support and make sure she had a good time, keeping her mind preoccupied. Now, this dude was a real jerk, very possessive and controlling, so I was glad she ditched him. He didn't like her hanging out with several of her friends, including me or other guys. He was the jealous type, or maybe he was just projecting because he did cheat on her. He obviously wasn't invited to the party, and her parents even said that to not only her, but me, while her mom explicitly told me that if he did show up, to call them immediately. So yes, this wasn't some secret party or anything. Her parents allowed it as they were going to go out for that night, literally leaving the house to us. The party was going to actually take place in the garage. It was one of those 2-car garages, and there was only going to be about a dozen kids max, so there was plenty of room. This way, we also weren't in the way or a bother to some if they came home early. They brought some decorations, snack foods, candy, and drinks for us. Her dad even got an old stereo and TV from some thrift store that he set up in there to have music or watch movies. Halloween and the party was going to be that Saturday, so I went over there after school on Friday to help her decorate and organize the place. Going to the day of the party now, I dressed up in something simple yet creepy. I had a black suit and tie and found a plain white head and face cover with small mesh spots for the eyes and mouth. I was abnormally tall for my age, so I was going as Slender Man. It was pretty good, even if it was a lazy attempt, I suppose. I was just excited for the party and to have fun with my friends. I entered through the side door as the garage door itself was covered in decorations. We also didn't want to have to open the whole thing each time someone comes and goes. Iris and 2 other girls were already there and chatting, so I went over and talked with them. I helped her bring out the last few food items, and as more people arrived, her parents came in to check on us and let us know they were leaving, so we were all left to ourselves. The last few people showed up, so we turned up the music and just talked, laughed, and ate for an hour or so. A song came on the radio, so a couple of the girls, Iris included, started doing some dumb dance to it while the rest of us watched. Once it was over, I went to approach Iris and noticed her face turned sour. She seemed to be looking past me, so I turned around to look and saw none other than Blaine, grabbing a handful of pretzels. He had been dressed up as Ghostface, so no one noticed it was him. Granted, we were kind of dumb, I guess, to not double-check faces, but there really was only a small group of people that were going to be there. And since he wasn't invited, and everyone that was there knew that, we didn't expect him to show up under a mask just to try to get in. I told her I would tell him to leave, but she declined, saying she would take care of it. If I had known what I knew about him now, I wouldn't have let her. She approached him, and I heard her say something about him not being invited. The other guests noticed him too, so we were trying to give them privacy, but we also couldn't look away. I got into a small conversation with one of the other guys there, but it wasn't long after that I heard Blaine's outburst. He shouted something like, "You didn't even give me a chance to explain." Iris was shouting back, so I decided to step in, not only for her safety, but at the request of her parents. I told him he was not allowed here and that he needed to leave, when he backed up and started making comments about Iris and I. He said he was going to call the cops on us for having an illegal party, which made Iris laugh. She said her parents set this up and encouraged him to call the cops as he would be the one arrested. This seemed to anger him more, so he pulled out what we thought was a fake knife for his costume, but quickly we realized that wasn't the case. He made some loud, threatening comments, causing everyone to stop and watch at this point. I held my hands up and tried to calm him down as I slowly stepped in front of Iris. Unfortunately, he noticed my maneuver immediately and shoved me to the side, cutting me in the shoulder, and went after Iris. She tried running back to get to the door, but he grabbed her by the arm and was waving the knife in her face. I don't know what came over me. Maybe it was just the dumb teenage adrenaline, but I kicked him in the back of the knee and he dropped like a bag of bricks. I felt bad since he did have a knife and was in Iris's face, but thankfully he dropped the knife as he fell and she got head-butted by him as he went down. Before I could process my actions, I had kicked him in the side, hoping to knock the wind out of him and keep him down while one of the other guys got on his back to hold him down. I dropped down to sit across his legs to stop him from kicking and yelled to have someone call the cops. It was exhausting holding him down, but it probably didn't take as long as we thought it did. The police showed up, talked to all of us, and he was left in the back of the cop car as we waited for her parents to get there. The cops talked to her parents and made it seem like it was just a bunch of teenage drama. Her parents got pretty mad at them about this and even escorted them in the house to show them their knives to show the one he had wasn't from their place. He did leave with the cops, and their parents decided to stay home for the rest of the night, but they didn't bother us. The rest of the night went fine. We just had to cheer Iris up a bit as she felt her party had been ruined, when really, it just gave us something to laugh about, and to be honest, I feel like we made a good team of guys protecting the girls. We did later learn that since he was a minor, they didn't really hold him. They brought him in, called his dad to come get him, and once he did, he was free to do whatever again. Her parents had to press charges and file a restraining order when he slashed the tires on one of their cars before they finally took action. Shortly after the party, he seemed to only go to school with the sole purpose of harassing Iris and sending us both death threats until he just stopped showing up. I'm unsure if he just dropped or had to change districts due to charges. This recently came up as I am still close friends with Iris, and I'm actually the godfather to her two young girls. We started talking about school and we both went to look him up and found out he was serving 12 years for aggravated assault, kidnapping, and a couple other charges, and it really freaked her out. Iris was always a friendly, outgoing girl, and I truly think she had feelings for him, but that soon changed when his true demeanor also came out. I'm thankful she got away from him before something happened to her. I just feel bad for anyone else that was unfortunate to become involved with him. So, yeah, that was probably one of the most eventful Halloweens I've ever had. So that, my friends, was our first collection of Halloween stories. This was my first because last year I had COVID around this time and I didn't want to do a whole lot of anything other than sleep. So I am much happier being able to do this instead. Much happier. And I did want to mention as well, if you don't have Halloween plans and you want something to do, you can always stop by. I will be streaming with Raven over on his channel. That's As the Raven Dreams. So yeah, you can stop by and say hi and just hang out. And otherwise, if you did enjoy this video, please do give it a like below. And if you'd like to hear more content like this, consider subscribing. And lastly, don't forget to leave a comment on your thoughts or let me know if you have ever dressed up for Halloween. What was your favorite costume? And with that being said, friends, I hope you have a fantastic week and a happy Halloween. And until next time, take care.